I want to point something else out here about patterns. Now, I used to teach foreign currency trading, and I learned about mathematics of Fibonacci. And Fibonacci is played out all around us. It's played out in the heavens, among the stars, the planets, the universe, the galaxies. It is played out in the trees, in the plants. It's played out in animals. It's played out in the makeup of our human bodies. These mathematics happen naturally over and over and over throughout the world and the universe, every day, all the time. They always have and they always will. This particular pattern is an impulse pattern. It's 5 waves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waves up and 3 waves down as a correction. The basic wave pattern goes up and down over and over and over and over and over as it trends. And then it will take a third wave up. 5 waves up, sometimes will extend into 9-wave pattern, and then 3 waves down. It gets more and more complex because it happens in degrees. You have lower wave patterns and large wave patterns. Here's the larger wave pattern here, but then there is a lower wave pattern, a smaller one that takes place within each one of these. Wave 1 here has 5 waves within it and 3 waves back. Wave 3 has 5 waves and 3 waves back. Wave 5 has 5 waves and then 3, 2, and 5 wave down on a correction. And then it gets even more complex. And you have 5 waves in each of these wave 1s, in this wave 1, that wave 1, and this wave 1. And it's that way infinitely higher and lower no matter how far you go. The complexities are important because these patterns play out not just in financial or economic patterns, but they also play out in world event patterns. In my book, The Last Step, this is just one dual page side by side which illustrates, to give you just a taste of what this book is about. Just 2 pages out of thousands. This book starts from the Grand Council in heaven. You read about this, it begins, actually talks about it symbolically in Revelation 12 that we were just speaking of regarding the fulfillment of Revelation 12 in this pattern. And yet, if you go back a little bit further, let me skip back a second here. This pattern only talks about Revelation 12 in a very narrow sense. The pattern of Revelation 12 with the woman here, the woman is thought of in the New Testament as being the mother of Christ, Mary. But it also represents what Mary births. Mary gives birth to Jesus. And what does Jesus represent? Jesus represents yet another level, which is his church, his 12 apostles, which he called. And now you look at those 12 apostles and the 12 stars that are the crown of the woman. The woman then represents also the church and the 12 apostles. Now, what about the 12 tribes of Israel? Yes, 12 tribes of Israel. Interesting sacred numbers that play out here. Now, what does the church represent? The 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles of the church, the woman, and all the 12 tribes of Israel that are scattered today throughout all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people. Those 12 tribes of Israel are going to be gathered. They're going to be gathered back. The promise made to Abraham, the Abrahamic covenant, that his seed would bless all the nations of the earth, actually foretold the scattering of Israel into all the nations of the earth. Because as Israel is scattered into all the nations of the earth, Israel acts as leaven to a loaf of bread. Leaven that gives life, leaven that gives hope, leaven that gives the promise of Abraham to all mankind, not just to the Jews, not just to Abraham's literal blood seed, but to all of the house of Israel who make up all those who will choose to follow the principles and values that are taught in this program called the 7 Pillars of Wisdom, 7 Pillars of Charity, 7 Pillars of the Gospel, 7 Pillars of the New Millennium. Whatever you want to call it, whatever is good, these are the 7 pillars that support it. The principles and values are parallel to Judeo-Christian principles. The 7 pillars include all truth and goodness, no matter where it comes from anywhere in the world. They measure it, they quantify it, they qualify it. And all people all around the world resonate with these values. This sign right here, this coming together, this September 23 of this formation, actually represents everything that's happening in these last days, in these end times. It has been prophesied for millennia before. It represents all of the house of Israel being drawn together again, being gathered together again from the 4 quarters of the earth, out of every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. Who will be qualified as the house of Israel to God? Who will be qualified as those who will be able to have the Abrahamic covenant, meaning that they will inherit the earth, they will inherit all that God has? Those who resonate with, who respond to, and who cleave to, striving with all their heart, might, mind, and strength to the principles and values that God espouses through the 7 pillars. I say through the 7 pillars because not just the principles and values of the New Testament or the Old Testament, but also the same and similar and parallel principles and values that are taught all around the world in many different faiths. Some may see that or think of that as sacrilege if they're Christian or sacrilege if they're Jewish. I do not mean disrespect to any faith. I simply promote the same equal, parallel principles and values that people espouse all around the world. This is our common ground. And those people who resonate with those values, those people who cleave to those values, those people who want to live by those values, who love their neighbor, who love themselves, who love their parents, who care for their children, those who love their countries, who love freedom, these are the people who are the honest of heart. And if they are honest of heart, they will also be pure of heart. God knows that there's no possible way any man, woman, or child among us can be perfect. But we can be honest of heart, which means we're willing to admit when we're wrong. As soon as we understand it or see it, we're willing to admit we're weak, that we need help. We're willing to give and serve and help others. We're willing to give and receive both together. We're willing to look out for one another. We're willing to care about those in our community. We're willing to essentially live by the principles and values that are espoused in this mission of Zion Life Foundation. Now, let's go back to this book real quick. This set of pages indicates, and it looks complicated, and it is. If you don't understand what it is, you might look at it, it looks like chicken scratch. But follow the green lines here that start from pre-mortal life. God in heaven sending Adam and Eve to the Garden of Eden. Lucifer is also cast into the earth with 1/3 of the hosts of heaven, which are represented by the 1/3 of the stars that were taken by the great tail of the red dragon in Revelation 12. They were cast into the earth. Those are the children of God who rebelled in heaven against God, who followed Lucifer, and they were cast into the earth. They are demons, they are devils, and they are the tempters and the tormentors and the opposition of all of mankind throughout the world. Now, this is Satan and hell down here where they're cast. But also, Satan was allowed to be in the Garden of Eden in the Old Testament. Lucifer was there. He spoke through the serpent to Eve and to Adam. He tempted Eve, and Eve, in the end, was willing finally to sacrifice herself for mankind. She didn't want to disobey God. So many people look at that wrong. They think Eve was tempted to do something evil. Yes, she gave in to disobey the word of God, to not partake of the forbidden fruit. But Eve knew. She had learned. She'd come to understand at least enough to know that the only way she was going to have children, the only way that mankind was going to come about was if she partook of that fruit, knowing that she would then also have to go and get Adam to also partake of that fruit. When she presented it to Adam, who had rejected it from Lucifer, Adam understood that he also needed to sacrifice himself so that mankind could come to pass, so that the children of God could come through them to populate all the earth. Watching this as it descends down here, we come down to this section. Now here's Enoch, 7 generations after Adam. Enoch is called by God at 65 years old to go and call the whole world to repentance. He's going to call them all to come back to the ways of God. In other words, to come back to the ways of Zion. Zion is an Adamic term. It was passed on through 7 generations of patriarchs until it got to Enoch, and Enoch preached Zion. He preached Zion, he built Zion, he brought people to Zion, and Zion was a place of peace, a place of love, of trust and honesty, of goodness and of cooperation, where people worked together to do things could not be done any other way. They built a holy city of Zion and all the surrounding lands and villages of the people who came to Zion, separating themselves as wheat from tares, the same way that is being done today, that is prophesied to be done in our day. You see I've circled it in green here. These are the times of parallel to the same times going on here in the times of Enoch and the great flood of Noah's time, the days of Peleg here when the earth was divided and the continents were no longer in one place, Abraham's time, the house of Israel, here we are, Israel's test, Moses leads God's people out of Sinai. This right here is our parallel time with the last days. This is a time when the same things that took place in Enoch's day are going to take place in our day and our children's day. The separation of wheat and the tares means the separation of the wicked from the righteous. The separation of those who love God or love truth and love freedom, love goodness, from those who do not. Those who choose to cleave to something less, something opposite. The separation of those things is taking place in our day. It is happening. And as this world becomes more and more corrupt, and it will, according to prophecy, it's going to continue just as we've seen it since 9/11. Regardless of what happens, it's going to continue happening. But as it does, watch for the same types of things to take place that have taken place in history. You saw the 10 plagues in Egypt in the Old Testament. You read about them. Watch for similar types of things to occur again. You watched great floods occur in history. Watch for them to occur again. Not that they'll flood the entire earth, but watch for them to occur again. You saw continents in the days of Peleg spoken of as they separated in the Old Testament. Watch for it in our future to happen, that they will come back together again. Will that cause devastation? You bet it will. You saw in the Old Testament only 4 verses are spoken of there where it says Enoch was no more. Enoch was taken by God. But not just Enoch. Enoch and all his people. Enoch and the holy city of Zion. Enoch and all the landmass around it where those people lived. It was taken from the earth. Watch in our future and our children's future, that city, that landmass, those people return. You watch it happen. What has been shall be again. Those people will return, and God will come with them in all his glory, which is the glory of heaven. And when that time comes, our day will be finished in this earth, and a new earth will begin, a new time will begin, a new lifestyle will begin. I've seen that lifestyle. I've seen it with my own eyes. God showed it to me on December 5th, 1991, with the same holy city of Zion that's going to return. Those 2 lifestyles will be the only 2 lifestyles remaining on the earth. All that which is of this world as we know it, of corruption, of evil, will be gone. It will be pulverized. It will be incinerated to dust on that day when in the clouds of heaven coming from the east, the Messiah returns with all the hosts of heaven in all their glory. And none will be able to withstand the day except those who accept all of the principles and values of the 7 pillars. Remember, the 7 pillars that I'll speak of in much more in depth later on encompass all truth, all goodness, anywhere it comes from, anywhere it's written. It also qualifies anything that is not. It measures it, it quantifies it, and it disqualifies it if it is not true. You can find it, you can do it yourself. Nobody has to tell you. I'm just going to teach you how to use those 7 pillars, because those 7 pillars are the only way we will survive these end times. The lifestyle it supports is the only way we'll survive these end times and enter into a new world and a new kingdom coming up. Paulette Stevens is standing here on the left with her hand up toward this board. She's the committee head over the 2015 Salt Lake City Parliament of World Religions. She's speaking to Catherine Hawkins at a 7 Pillars planning meeting. This was where we first introduced the idea that we would launch a cooperative of good neighbors.